everyone to the joint meeting for the Rules and Open Government Committee and Committee of the Whole. Tony, can we have a roll call, please?
Arenas, Cohen,
Here.
Davis,
Here.
Prowles,
Here.
Jones.
Present.
And it looks like Arenas just signed on.
Yes, I'm here, Tony. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to start out with the agenda for Tuesday, August 3rd. And we're going to start out on pages 4 and 5. Six and 7. Eight and 9. 10 and 11. 12 and 13. And that is it. And when we have a motion, can the maker of the motion include an ad sheet? So I'm going to go to the public and see if we have any public comments. I do not see any public comments, so I'm bringing it back to the committee. Can I get a motion in a second, please?
I'll move we approve the August 3rd agenda with the ad sheet.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Can I get roll call vote, please?
Arenas,
Yes.
Cohen,
Aye.
Davis,
Yes.
Prowles,
Yes.
Jones.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, on to the agenda for Tuesday, August 10th. And we're going to start out on pages 4 and 5. Six and 7. Eight and 9. 10 and 11. 12. All right, so I'm going to go to the public, see if we have any public speakers, and I don't see any. So I'm bringing it back to the committee. Can I get a motion in a second, please?
Move approval. Second.
All right, we have a motion in a second. Tony?
Arenas,
Yes.
Cohen,
Aye.
Davis,
Yes.
Prowles,
Yes.
Jones.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, on to the public record. I don't.
Motion to note and file.
All right,
I'll second, Perales.
thank you. And Tony?
There's no public speakers, so going to the vote, Arenas,
Yes.
Cohen,
Aye.
Davis,
Yes.
Prowles,
Yes.
Jones.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, on to the consent calendar. And I don't see any public speakers for consent. Wait, Paul? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Council. I would want to draw attention to the memo that was produced by Councilwoman Davis. Now, there was a word that I used a while back. I've been using this word often, and then the word is euthenics, euthenics. Now, euthenics is a science, and it's the science of studying environments, buildings, and structures and that influence on human behavior. Okay, and euthenics is a precursor. It is a precursor. Wherever euthenics exists, eugenics exists. And what eugenics was a movement that happened here in the United States, late 1800s, early 1900s. And what it is, it's a science of, you design particular, basically what we call it is gentrification. Okay, but this is a very specific science that designs areas with the intention of bringing certain breeds of human beings. And what it naturally does is, by design, it weeds human beings out. This is the purpose of euthenics. Euthenics sets the tone and sets the stage for eugenics. And then after a generation, what you're going to have is you're going to have a certain type of human being there. Chris Burton's degree is a euphemistic word for euthenics. His degree is in human geography. All human geography is a fancy word for euthenics. And where you have euthenics, you have eugenics. I really need to caution the council on this, because it's happening right here in her memo.
Thank you, Paul. Bringing it back to the committee.
We did get a second hand up for Tessa Woodmansey.
Okay. Thank you. Tessa, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, just listening to Paul and his concerns about eugenics and, what's happened to our people, what's happened to the people, and what capitalism has done with capitalism, which is based on fossil fuels. That's how we have capitalism. It's fossil fuels. And that's what has to go to zero. And we need to always remember that, because we are in a crisis. And like Greta Thunberg says, when you're in a crisis, that's all you talk about is the crisis. And like Gavin Newsom said, if you don't think climate change is happening and global warming is happening, just look with your eyes, and the disaster that we're having to witness with our eyes. And so, what we're talking about is the capitalism exploits people and nature for profit. And that's what San Jose is doing in terms of the development and the path for development now, like it's been redlining. Well, there's also, which actually I found out in my neighborhood, in the Garden Alameda on Shealy Avenue. He was a German. Okay, you couldn't be Jewish and buy, because we were the whites that had a separate, issue. We were Jewish. And so we Jews were the ones that could not buy in my neighborhood where I'm living now. And I'm Jewish from New York, or actually from Russia, Romania. And so, this is our history, and you are building, taking our lands. That's what the city of San Jose is doing, has been doing continuously, is taking our lands and capitalizing on them, financializing them. And that's why a hotel is being built in my neighborhood. We are demanding that the general plan is corrupt, because this is what you have been doing, is making jobs when, the issues are crises, which are we need to have food security, we need housing, and you're not addressing those issues. You are making money and business as usual, building.
Thank you, Tessa. Okay, bringing it back to the committee.
Move approval.
Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Second.
All right. Tony, go ahead.
Arenas,
Yes.
Cohen,
Aye.
Davis,
Yes.
Peralez,
Yes.
Jones.
Hi.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to know that I'm not the only one that's in recess vacation mode. Anyway, next topic is terminate San Jose service retirement benefits for convicted felons. And we're going to go to the public first, and I see a couple of hands raised. So Tessa, go ahead.
Good, thank you. Okay, retirement benefits for convicted felons. It'd be nice if it was on the screen so I can look at it again. It doesn't say what the topic is. That would be good if you did that. That's good democracy, good education, but you're not doing that. So, and the issue is, retirement benefits for convicted felons. I mean, and so, I can't even grapple my mind at what that actually means. But, our whole issue of retirement benefits and, the whole capitalization of our city in regards to, what we're paying and where our money is going. Everything has to be looked at in terms of how we are reducing our fossil fuels to zero. Has to be our focus, or we will not survive as a species. And you can say I'm, exaggerating, but the truth is that is what everybody's talking about, is extinction of the human being, and also the million other species that are scheduled for threatened with extinction. And now with the fires, we're losing the bears, we're losing, it's terrible. And then, our trees are how we get to net zero, that we have this, we're investing in trees. Well, now the trees are all being burned down, so the net zero has to go away. It's no longer net, it's zero. And this is what we have to be doing. And all of our money and our retirement funds and everything like that, our future is in risk. And we need to be thinking about that. That's why I'm saying I want to grow food at 615 Stockton Avenue. And everyone say, oh, that's ridiculous. Yeah, well, you have money. You have lots of money in Parks and Recs. And I want that bought for resiliency and to create a community center that helps us to all become patrons of husbandry. We all need to be required that our lands be productive.
Thank you. Matt?
Hi, my name is Matt Mason. I'm the union rep for IFPT Local 21. First, I'd like to say that Local 21 believes that police officers convicted of murder or sexual assault should have an investigation into how to vacate their pension benefits. This goes without saying. Well, we believe these examples that were cited in this memo are purposely provocative. Our union has concerns about this memo being proposed today for several reasons. First, the language being proposed is seriously overbroad. In the mayor's own memo, he references how the current Muni Code already allows the retirement boards to vacate pension benefits for employees who have been convicted of treason or a felony. And under the 2013 Pension Reform Act, this type of ability is already given to other pension systems as well. So to automatically vacate these benefits based on any felony conviction is a serious overreaction and overreach. I'm sure as a federal prosecutor in the past, I don't have to remind Mayor Liccardo that it is relatively easy to obtain a felony conviction in this country, as it's also not hard at the state level. In fact, it's known that people of color are much more at risk to be convicted of a felony than others because of access to quality representation and how drug laws have been written to prejudice poor communities. The language being presented today opens up the possibility for felony convictions having nothing to do with public service, such as drug use or possession or tax evasion, where benefits would automatically be vacated unless the individual is able to either clear the offense or get it commuted. Third, this change may also violate the Measure B settlement because it goes beyond the already existing ability of the retirement board's ability to vacate vested benefits. I'd like to end this by asking the current retirement board director, if they're on this call, to speak on how the retirement boards currently are informed of felony convictions, such as the examples of Derek Shaven, the example that was given in the mayor's memo, for them to consider the ability to vacate their benefits. Does the notification process perhaps need to be updated instead of this proposed change, which is severely overbroad? Thank you.
Thank you. Paul?
Yes, I'd like to speak to the time, the energy, the resources that it takes to put this on the this committee for discussion, because it's obvious that Mayor Liccardo is trying to insert his version of morality, okay, and use his moral compass that he picks and chooses when to practice it and when not to. He wants to insert morality and create a law from it, okay, and then have that law binding. Okay, Mayor Liccardo's time to exercise morality as it reflects in the law was a long time ago when he signed that non-disclosure agreement with Google. Okay, that was the time for Mayor Liccardo to exercise his moral authority from his position of power to protect the people. When he failed that and failed the people as a result of it, and then he wants to use something like this in order to make himself appear at our expense, because this takes time and energy to do, at our expense, in order to make him look like he is the defender, because his reasoning and his justification for it was he said that the people and the taxpayer deserve better. Okay, that's paternalistic. I don't need him deciding for me what it is that is better for me. What is better for us and the people is protection from billionaires. That's what we need. We don't need pension time being wasted on pension funds when Mexicans and the Latinos on the east side have bullseyes on them. They have bullseyes on them because of this 400,000 people that you have slated to come to this city. You're going to have to vacate at least 200,000 to accommodate that. So I would suggest that Mayor Ricardo expend his energies on that instead of something petty like this.
Thank you. Jason?
Jason Condit? You're unmuted.
Hello?
There you go.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jason Condit. I'm an employee with the City of San Jose and a member of Local 21 AEA Union. The Muni Code already allows for the pension boards to vacate pension benefits for felony convictions for treason. And also this appears to be a reporting problem to report back to the board. Also, what is exactly the problem that's not already fixed under the current Muni Code and the pension reform that Matt mentioned under from 2013? What are we trying to fix by this? Also, the idea to automatically vacate the pension benefits because of a felony conviction is way overboard. When someone could have their vested benefits vacated for a totally unrelated work item, there's many different felonies that, such as a fish and game violation, like using a gill net to catch salmon, food and agricultural, like selling uninspected meat. These are felonies, but to lose your pension over something like that is pretty ridiculous. Also, people of color have an unequal chance of being convicted of a felony. This is also an automatic trigger that can unequally harm those of color, even if those convictions are totally unrelated to something that happened on the job. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary?
Yes, good afternoon, Vice Mayor Jones, council members. My name is Mary Blanco. I'm the business representative for Operating Engineers Local 3. I have more questions than comments, but first I do want to start off by stating that we currently have a retirement MOA that was negotiated in 2015, and it doesn't expire until June 30 of 2025. It appears that this issue should have been brought up at that time, as it was under the Public Employees Pension Reform Act, also known as PEPRA. Number two, the memorandum proposes revising the Muni Code to automatically terminate service retirement benefits upon conviction of a felony. It does not define the felony. So am I right to assume any felony would trigger this proposed revision? Number three, when would this felony have occurred? For example, while still employed by the city, after retirement from the city? I would like you to understand that several vested OE3 members contacted me inquiring if a felony conviction prior to coming to work for the city would prevent them from receiving their pension in the future. It is very broad, and I have a lot of questions. Last but not least, my reading of the cases that have been reviewed by the appellate court ties the felony forfeiture to job-related felonies that have a material relation to the theory or operation of a pension plan. This proposal appears to be more in line with trying to lessen public outrage, which the courts have ruled is not permissible. I know that our pension plan is underfunded, but I don't believe that this proposal is the way to fix it. It would do more harm than good. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have no more public speakers, so I'm bringing it back to the committee. And Councilmember Davis, go ahead.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I have some questions about this, and I don't know if they are for Jennifer or Nora. I saw the memo, obviously, and the two examples that were given here about convictions of sexual offenses and people still receiving pensions. I don't know if these were, I guess I have a lot of questions as well about how the Police and Fire Board or the Federated Pension Board, were they made aware of these two cases, for example, and opted to keep the pensions for these two people? What's the mechanism by which pension benefits would get withheld or stripped if somebody is convicted of a felony? How does it work right now?
So Jennifer Schembri, Director of Employee Relations and Human Resources. Roberto is actually on. I don't know if that.
Oh, I didn't see that. Yep, Roberto.
Yes, good afternoon, council member. That's a very good question. So the process right now is, first of all, to answer your question, these two specific cases happened some 10, 11 years ago. We actually just became aware of it, just as city staff became aware of it, I think this month. Okay. We don't have a process specifically where we do a search to see if there are any convictions, so they have to be treated. So the straightforward answer to your first question is no, this issue has not been brought up to the board for determination. Again, we became aware just now, and we are in fact proceeding to address this issue through the board. There is a process that we have to follow, and this is very likely could end up in court. So we have to make sure that we follow the correct procedure. So we don't really have any comments on what's being proposed, other than we hope that both boards get the chance to comment on it in the regular course of business whenever an ordinance is being proposed to the city council. But again, the straightforward answer to the question is we haven't addressed this issue. No, not at the board level. Okay.
I've been on the Federated Board for 4.5 years, and I don't remember it coming up. So I just wanted to confirm. I didn't know if it had happened at Police and Fire, because obviously I don't follow that one as closely. So it seems to me, Nora, that this is basically a flip of the default mechanism. So by default, the benefits would be terminated upon a felony conviction, and the board would be able to reinstate them through a process, as opposed to what happens now, which is that the board has to take action. So there's sort of an opt-out versus opt-in situation happening. Do I read that correctly?
That does appear to be what the mayor is suggesting, yes. And
okay. And do you have any comment on what the process should be for changing this, given, or maybe Jennifer, given all of the ordinances that we have, but also the propositions that we've voted on to get to the current structure of the retirement boards and relationship with the city council?
I'll jump in, and then Jennifer or Roberto, if you want to jump in also. Right now, the charter has provisions both for police and fire and for federated about pension benefits being affected by felony conviction or treason. The Muni Code has provisions for police and fire. There aren't Muni Code provisions for how that decision should be approached for federated. Both charter provisions suggest that the pension benefits may be withdrawn, but it isn't mandatory. It could be made mandatory in the Muni Code. It would depend on the language, and there would need to be some care as to what would be a trigger and how we deal with due process and some of those types of issues. And we would need to look at that and come back if this is goes to council.
Okay. Jennifer, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I would just agree with that, that I think there are some complications. The retirement MOA was mentioned as well, and I think we need a little bit of time to look at all of that and figure out a process.
So if we move forward with this today, I assume we would just be having a discussion similar to this one at council before you came back. When would you want to do that? Would you want to do a little bit more work if we move this to council so that we say come to council for a discussion, or does it need to come to closed session first? I guess I'm trying to figure out what the process is and what the timeline should be.
If it's in, again, Jennifer and Roberto jump in, but for our office, we would need to, we wouldn't be prepared in a short time frame to bring an ordinance forward, and there was a lot that would need to be vetted. So if it went to council, it would go as a discussion at council and then a referral to our office and the city manager's office and whoever else is involved, perhaps the retirement boards, to bring something back. We think that's the best way. And then if there are legal risks, of course, we would bring that into closed session to discuss with council at some point in the process.
Okay. I'm comfortable having that discussion with the full council. I see all my colleagues also have their hands raised. So I expect that this would have a robust discussion at council. So I'm fine bringing it to council and learning more and figuring out how this process would work. I'm hesitant to make a motion because I want to hear from my colleagues first. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cohen.
Yeah, thank you. Some questions kind of along the same lines as Councilmember Davis, but when I first saw this, my instinct tells me that there's some there were some steps kind of bypassed in bringing this to rules at this stage before having some conversation about this and before potentially discussing whether this is a question for negotiation with bargaining units, because it's not clear to me that this is something that should be a council action versus a negotiated action. And maybe this question for Jennifer and Nora also. Is this something that should be, that if it were changed, should be negotiated as a change rather than something that should be imposed by council?
So I do think that's something we're still looking at, and we can bring back to you and potentially in closed session as a negotiation item.
So I guess my preference at this stage is for us to maybe have a closed session discussion about this issue and what the concerns might be and what the various issues are. And it sounds like from the question that Councilmember Davis asked, there's more of a question of how does the city become aware of felony convictions in the first place in order to even trigger the whatever action occurs, whether it was automatic or follows the process that exists now. If it turns out that the city wasn't made aware of these particular cases that were the examples given in this memo, it doesn't seem to me, it strikes me that whatever the process was, no action would have occurred either way, because somebody has to call attention to the city if there's a conviction, right? So I think there's a little bit more research that has to be done before we're ready as a council to have this conversation. So maybe my preference would be for us to have a closed session discussion before we even agendize this for council action, find out what the proper approach would be, whether we need a change, what the issues are, what the proper approach would be to make a change if it's even necessary, and whether this is something that should go to negotiation. And all those questions should be answered before we decide to bring this to full council for discussion. So that's my preference at this stage.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Arenas.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And I'm also still stuck a little bit in summer, but nothing like a controversial issue to kind of get us out of our summer rut. So this is definitely something that I perked up when I read this memo, because I thought it was a very broad brush approach to crime, especially felony crime, that is so nuanced. Even murder is so nuanced. It's not just murder, it's second degree murder, it's manslaughter, second degree I mean, you know, there's just so much to murder and to sexual assault, which are the two areas where I would definitely draw a line in terms of who we have working with our public. I know that we already have background checks, and so those and the process that Jennifer's office goes through to hire people on already does a really good job in terms of filtering folks out that may not be eligible to work at Kelly Park with children, right? Or code enforcement and to come into people's homes if they've had a different kind of a background. So I think we already have a lot of that in place. And I think what we're looking at now, and now that this issue has arisen, is really the process about how do we inform the retirement board, and what does the retirement board do in terms of, I think this is a decision that really is not for the council really at this moment. I think it has some conversations that are missing. I would hate for us to repeat the same mistake that maybe past councils have made in terms of not sitting down. If the mayor was here, I would have asked, have you spoken to the unions? And from what it sounds like, and the speakers that have already come on, that conversation hasn't been had. And actually, it sounds like it might be a bit of an intrusion from the last time that the council went to the voters without having a conversation with the unions. And so I think we need to make sure that we really vet this out in Nora's office. Not necessarily with the council. I think that's the second conversation that we need to have, but I think we need to make sure that we vet this through the attorney's office, that we're not violating that MOA that that the council back in 2015, 16 through the Measure B agreed. So is this something that you need time to do, Nora? Because it sounds like you're saying that maybe what we could do is have a discussion with in closed session, but I would not want to have this discussion if we can't, if it's not legally, you know, if we really can't do much about this.
We are looking at it. CalPERS has provisions. There are plans that have provisions for the elimination of pension benefits with certain triggers. And as I say, the charter has language and has had for quite some time. How we do that is, I think the purpose of the memo and from the mayor and the suggestion by the mayor, whether or not we can just do it immediately upon the conviction is something that we're still looking at. We can bring, if the council wants us to bring forward changes along these lines and to bolster that decision-making process, we can work on that and bring something forward. We can also have.
So it sounds like we wouldn't be violating the MOA that we had through. Oh, so sorry. Through Measure B.
We're looking at that, and we don't think it does. But that's something we're still confirming. But we don't think it violates that language. But again, that's something we would need to work with. And I think Jennifer had indicated that it is something that she would go through a meet and confer process with the unions also at some point if we were putting language together. So that can take place really anywhere along the line. I don't know what Jennifer's preference is. But there's the charter language right now provides for the elimination of the pension benefit if there's a conviction of a felony or someone commits treason. So that is in the charter.
Sure.
And
Yes, I did see that municipal code that was included in the mayor's memo, and but although when he had I think those 2 items in his memo, he took it one step further and said that the survivors wouldn't be eligible to receive some of those benefits if they were, or the family members, not the survivors, obviously, if the person survived, that means that somebody's passed away. So the family members wouldn't be eligible to receive some of the benefits if we vacated the pension benefits to the employee if they lived under the same roof in the same address. And that's not what the municipal code had in that very same memo that the mayor had. So he took it one step further. And so to me, this is we're going down the road of trying to figure out what's the morality of this issue. And I think that what we need to do is first figure out whether this is legal. Second, let's figure out what the process is. And third, these are best practices, lessons from our past. Let's sit down with our unions and figure out whether this is really an issue or not. If these are 2 police officers, obviously, who are interacting with our public on an ongoing basis, or actually these are not, these are retired folks. But so if these were folks who had previously committed felonies, obviously not police officers, but in other departments, then we need to take a look at some of these questions that I think, I'm not sure which of my colleagues said that they have more questions than they have answers. And I think this is an indication that this is obviously a very premature memo to submit to rules. And I think it needs to be vetted out. So I'm going to make a motion to first have a conversation with a sit down or a meet and confer, whether it is now or the next time we are allowed to meet. I don't know why this shouldn't come up in this last round that we just finished with our unions. Timing might have been an issue, but I think we need to time it with what our process, we know the process to be. And I don't know what in the next time we meet and confer, I think 2 years, Jennifer, is that?
Yeah, I mean, we can meet and confer about things, mid-contract as well. I think there's a couple questions first that need to be answered. I think the legality, the questions you're answering, and then the retirement MOA, I think we still need to look at that. And I'm interested in hearing kind of the union's perspective on that. And I think once we get those issues, we can come to you in closed session, because I would get my meet and confer direction from you in closed session. But I think we need those first 2 things that you mentioned, which are really important, answered first and clear on those 2 before we did that.
Right. So my motion is to first figure out whether this is legal. So have this analysis go through the city attorney's office to have a potential meet and confer with through your arm of the department, Jennifer. And then also figure out what the process is for the retirement board, for them to identify a process that identifies these employees and then triggers the board to actually review the cases, because at this point they don't have a mechanism, they don't have a process. And so that concerns me as we move along. Hopefully, I know we have a wonderful fire and police department. And so I trust that these 2 are kind of anomalies. There isn't anything for the federated, so I think that question is still unanswered. And I think about rehabilitation and what our probation department has in the direction that it's been moving in, and that really is to rehabilitate folks to integrate back into our society. And when we say, you've paid your dues, but we won't allow you to come in and work on our streets, on our sewers, in our parks. Well, whatever area that maybe not maybe limited in terms of interacting with our public. I think that this now becomes a question of morality. Obviously, there's some parameters that we need to make sure that we are concretely abiding, and that is some sexual assault issues and obviously molestation and those kinds of felonies that would create really a risk for our public. At this point, I don't know that this is the issue that we are trying to solve for now, but the issues that I've seen so far are the ones that I've made into a motion. So first, have the analysis through our city attorney. Second, the meeting confer piece or discussions with our union, and then the identified process with our retirement boards that identify and then trigger a process for those who need to have those pension benefits vacated.
Councilmember Reyes, just so I understand your motion, are you want to give direction for staff to come back in closed session with the answers and direction to your questions? Or
We can come back in right. We could in closed session, that's fine with me. I just don't think it's appropriate for the rules committee to come back to have the second follow-up discussion. But I also don't think it's appropriate for our council to have because it's so premature. So closed session is fine with me.
Thank you.
And hopefully I'll get a second.
Okay.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is that it, Councilmember Reyes? Okay, good. Councilmember Perales.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Mayor, and appreciate the commentary thus far. I think Councilmember Arenas pointed it out correctly. Nothing like a nice little controversial topic to get us back into the swing of things. And I will say, the mayor is typically very prescriptive in his directions and thoughtful, whether I agree with those thoughts or not, but he's typically very just prescriptive and thoughtful. And on such I think an issue that he must have known would have been controversial, if not debatable. I am surprised that he's not here, that someone from his staff to address what clearly are a lot of questions. And so I'm going based off of what I can read here. And having to assume that through what the mayor's past practices are, that his memo is very intentional. And so within it, what I'm reading are number one, a very broad use of the word felony, and he doesn't indicate what types of felonies we would be considering here. Provides some examples that are obviously in and of themselves very controversial. And ones that I think are triggering for that purpose, but yet the broad use of the word felony that he's using would incorporate, as we know, every felony, as far as I'm concerned. He doesn't specify any differently there. Additionally, the felony conviction is not denoted as though it would have to be work related, which my current understanding would be what the authority that our boards have today would allow them that opportunity for felonies that were actually work related to be able to forfeit an employee's pension. And so I think in that essence, I'm having to interpret that he's meaning any felony, whether it's work related or outside of work. And so very broad, I think, terms in potential consequences. The other thing as well that he's utilizing is talking about forfeiting of pensions. He doesn't specify the portion that the city is putting in versus the portion that the public employee puts in. All of our public employees are putting in a contribution towards their pensions as well. And if you look through the current authority, it talks about a forfeiture of the city's portion, but that individual would still be able to collect or get returned what was their portion, their contribution. So that's not included either. So I think broad is an understatement to kind of describe where the mayor was going, and an overreach, no doubt, in my mind, an insult to our public employees. I would hope that he maybe would have some responses to those, but again, don't necessarily have that opportunity to engage here, which is why I also think it is premature before moving really anywhere else for that matter, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know, with the examples you used, I don't know anybody on our council that would, support continuing a pension for an officer that was convicted of a felony offense on duty or work related. Again, I think those are very, the examples that he's utilizing are very triggering, but they're, I think, misleading based on what his proposal actually states. And so it sounds like the one thing that I've learned, at least today, from Roberto, was that we don't seem to have a good process for actually identifying when something like that may happen, and for our boards to be able to make a decision on should they be forfeiting somebody's pension, or at least, again, that portion that the city has contributed. So if anything, that would be what I think might deserve a further look, and ensure that we can be notified and that we're aware of those things, and that those decisions are being made by our board. And so what I don't see is also any sort of response from staff on the early consideration, as we've sometimes have done, get an idea on the staff time. We're hearing a little bit about that here, that Nora, you're stating this is not something that you'd necessarily be able to, return back extremely quickly on. I know, Jennifer, based on what you're saying, it would require some discussions initially, at least, right, with our bargaining units, and it looks like it would take some time. So I'm curious on that. We didn't get that here. What does that look like for the consideration of staff time that would go into this? Let's say, for instance, just coming back to rules as the current motion is stated. I'm sorry, not rules. Coming back to closed session as the current motion states. What amount of work are we looking at for that?
I can probably jump in on the form. And, we didn't do a form for a variety of reasons. And part of it might be that I'm transitioning from vacation mode back into work mode, like many of you. But typically that's something the administration and the city manager's office does for staffing capacity. We do not require other appointees, such as Nora or others, to do it. And I think, there are gray areas of that memo that I think, as a team, obviously the attorney's office and Jennifer's team and CMO, that we do need to figure out, council member. So you're accurate in us trying to figure that out. And that would be part of the process of putting that form together, to figure out what is needed. I think the direction the council member Arenas laid out, which is what we would traditionally do to build a form and then bring it to closed session, we would typically greenlight something like that. Or if you were writing a memorandum like that, we would be working with you hand in hand to kind of develop that, as we do a lot of the time. So I think the direction on the table is a green light to at least prep something for closed session down the road. Absolutely.
And do we have a estimated time on something like that, when we might be able to agendize this discussion in closed session?
I would defer to Nora for that, or Jennifer.
I would probably need a couple weeks. I don't know about Nora.
And at least we would probably consult with outside counsel also to get some specific pension advice.
Okay, so we don't know exactly just yet. Okay. Well, I am actually a little torn, because I don't even know if I want to support the current motion, and I'll describe why. I think there's a lot of gray area, as Lee described, certainly as I've described in my comments on questions and clarity that I would need before we spend some more time on it. And I think I could find some common ground that where I think most of us would likely even agree on some of these instances. But we don't have that clarity here. I don't think somebody from the mayor's office has joined. Is that correct? I don't see anybody, so I was just given an opportunity. So for me, I would actually suggest that the mayor comes back, goes back to the drawing boards, comes back to rules with a different proposal, or even if he wants to come with the same proposal, I'd ask staff to come back with an actual response at that time on early consideration. And then I would be more comfortable deciding, what the next step should be. Should it be something that goes to closed session? Is it something that would come forward to council? But that would be my suggestion before we even move it forward quite frankly, anywhere, I'm happy to have that conversation should it make it to closed session. But that would be my suggestion. So I won't necessarily make a substitute motion, but I'm not going to support the motion on the table. Should this motion fail, that would be my motion. Actually, would just be to let it fail and let the mayor come back to rules on another day. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Arenas. Councilmember?
I'm so sorry. Have my trouble with my mute button. So I'm very open, Councilmember Peralez, to having an amendment on my motion. I think I agree with your process. I think there is. I think my motion just describes the kind of the areas where I think there needs to be additional work. But I'm also open to having this just go back to the mayor's office so that they can complete the work that we see missing. So now, however that happens, it doesn't have to be in closed session. It could be resubmitted to rules, and then the rules committee can at that point decide, how we want to deal with that, whether it's appropriate to move this forward, or is it a priority setting item if staff identifies it to be a huge lift for that. If you'd like to make a recommendation or an amendment.
My suggestion would just be simply that we vote no on anything moving forward. That would then, by default, you can tell me if I'm right, Nora or Lee, but that would by default require the mayor just to come back to rules at a future meeting, correct?
Yes.
That is correct.
So I won't make a substitute. I'm just going to vote no. I think regardless of whatever we put forward, ask the mayor to come back, with something.
No problem.
Okay. Councilmember Cohen.
Just parliamentarily, obviously, Councilmember Arenas can withdraw her motion. We don't have to vote at all. But anyway, I do want, I hesitate only for one part. I mean, I don't think all the elements of Councilmember Arenas' motion are necessary, but I do think that we should have a closed session discussion before rules has this discussion again. I mean, if we're asking the mayor to come back to rules, I still think, at least myself, I'm going to say, well, I still don't know enough about some of the elements of this to make a decision at the Rules Committee. And I think that having at least some report to Rules Committee and some discussion on some of these elements, some report to closed session and having a discussion on some of these elements before Rules Committee, then here's another proposal from the mayor would be helpful, because I don't know that I'd be in a better place to make any better decision on the Rules Committee next time the mayor brings a more well thought out proposal forward. And I agree with you that the proposal here is not well thought out, either appears rushed or purposely overbroad, but it was clearly overbroad and not detailed enough and not specific enough. But bringing it back still will leave me with a lot of questions that I think will be better answered in closed session. And so if the motion could be just amended to say, let's have a discussion in closed session about some of the questions of whether or not, of what the process should be, what the appropriate procedure is, what might be missing, and as to why some of these cases were not brought forward, so that we can understand better what changes may be warranted, or maybe whether the process is even broken at all, what parts of the process might need to be fixed in order to address issues that some people see being out there, so that next time there's a proposal from the mayor, we're better equipped to be able to address it. I'd at least like to have that be the next step in the process.
Vice Mayor, may I respond to that?
Yes, go ahead, Councilmember.
Councilmember Cohen, I'm open to that. I think you're right. We might not be in a different position in the future if we ask to have a resubmittal of maybe the same memo, and we'll be having this discussion all over again. So what I don't know what my colleagues think. I don't know that we're all on the same page. We're gonna get there, but I'm open to having the recommendation to have a follow-up discussion in closed session, but then also rejecting the memo. And you know, some of the recommendations or the discussion areas that we've had are obviously areas of concern for the Rules Committee, and whether the mayor or administration wants to answer those questions, I think would be to their benefit if they want the memo approved at a future point. So I'm absolutely open to that, and I'll amend my motion to reject the current memo and to have a follow-up discussion in closed session to hopefully have some of the legal answers to some of the questions that I posed and some of my colleagues posed.
And I was the seconder, so I will accept the amended motion.
All right.
Perfect.
Okay, so it's been amended. Councilmember Cohen, are you done?
Yeah, I'm done, thanks.
Okay. Councilmember Davis.
Thank you.
Well, actually, I'm sorry, Councilmember Arenas, you had your hand up actually before. Was that to address the questions that you just addressed, or did you have a different?
Yes, it was. No, that's all. Thank
okay.
you, Vice Mayor.
Got it. All right, Councilmember Davis.
Thank you. I'll support the motion as amended. I think it's important for us to come back to closed session. I don't know that it's important to reject the mayor's memo at this point, but because it has clearly spurred discussion and we're not referring it on to open session, but as long as we go to closed session and have this discussion about what next steps could and should be, and give an opportunity to for us to give direction to Jennifer and find out more from Nora, I think that would be good. Thanks.
All right. Councilmember Paulus.
Yeah, thank you. Seeing the direction, I would like to just ask that we make it really specific. The only thing I'm comfortable if we're going to be spending further time and energy on this is really looking at the current system that we have today, which allows for pensions to be forfeited in specific circumstances. What it sounds like we have is maybe an imperfect system, or at least a notification that is not working well, as Roberto pointed out today. That's what I'd like the conversation to be about. And so I'm comfortable with the fact that we are specifically going to say we will reject the recommendations within the mayor's memo, but I'd also like to just make it very specific that our conversation in closed session should be around that specific issue of notification on current qualifiers of felony convictions, work related, right, fitting all those parameters, but that we focus the conversation there. That I would be comfortable supporting. And so if we can be very specific in the motion, I'm comfortable supporting that.
So Councilmember Rawls, are you requesting further refinement or clarification in the motion?
I think just clarification. It sounds more or less maybe within the spirit of what Councilmember Cohen and Arenas had talked about. But yes, clarification would help if what I'm describing here, Councilmember Arenas, is your motion, or if you can maybe specify that, then
sure. Yeah, and what I suggested were the legal issues that were brought up in the discussion. It could be specifically to what is currently in the municipal code, which is on the job or felonies that are related to your job. So we can continue to speak in reference to that, because that's the only thing that's on the books for now. And I'm fine with that, because I think we need to figure out the legality. Can we even move forward with the discussion and not violate our MOA? And that's one of the areas that I'm most concerned about. But yeah, absolutely, I'm fine with adhering to the parameters that you just discussed.
Okay. And is that okay with the seconder? Go ahead, Councilmember Cohen.
I was going to say, I just wanted to make sure that we don't completely limit the conversation, because if there's concerns from the council about whether we need to proceed with any changes. I mean, we should be available, we should be open to having those questions be asked and answered during that closed session discussion. So starting with what's currently there, what's working and not working with the current process is how we should start. But if somebody feels, well, there's something that might need to be changed, we should be able to ask those questions and be ready to, and have our staff have answers to those questions, so that if somebody were to bring forward a memo suggesting these changes coming forward, you know, we've already had some of this discussion about what's legitimate and what is the right process to pursue those changes, so that we're not going back through the same discussion again sometime in the future at the Rules Committee.
Great. Nora, there's nothing that prohibits us from even asking questions that come up, regardless of how we define the parameters and rules. I mean, in closed session, as long as it's on the subject, we can ask pretty much any question we want, correct? No? As you all shaking his head no.
Well, it depends on whether or not it's a matter that can go to closed session. So labor negotiations are one of those matters. Potential or threatened litigation are matters that can go. So if this is being considered by the council, either the mayor's memo or changes to the provisions for termination of pension benefits, that obviously could be the subject of litigation. But if this is just not something you're even going to bring forward, either to council or not something you want the city to consider, then there may not be that reason to be in closed session. So, and Jennifer may not have a reason to meet and confer either. So that's my only concern. But otherwise, if it's something we're bringing forward or the council wants us to consider or brief them on, and the council is going to consider changes to the Muni Code, some type of legislation that has litigation risks, then yes, we can talk about that. We can talk about the risks, and my office would be broadly considering and bringing to the council what those risks may be.
Okay. So if you're bringing it to closed session, obviously that you've determined that it's appropriate to do so. Once it's in closed session, if we have some very clearly defined parameters that come out of rules in terms of what we can talk about or what questions we can ask, then what you're telling me is that we can't, in closed session as council members, we can't go outside of those clearly defined parameters.
Well, the parameter would be municipal code changes, either changes to the existing municipal code, which affects only the police and fire plan, and or bringing forward similar language that would affect the federated plan, because there's nothing in the Muni Code right now on the federated plan. So if the request is for us to look at how we can terminate benefits in a more expeditious manner for people who are convicted of felonies, and what would those felonies be? Do they have to be while on work? Would it matter if it occurs during the time of a person's, during the retirement period and not during the employment period? All those kinds of issues. I've got a list a mile long from your questions here. We would bring forward all of those items as we were making recommendations, if that's where the council decides they want to go.
Great, thank you, Nora. Raul, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to point out some of the things, but Nora just did. I think that's where I just wanted to make sure we're obviously at the moment directing it to closed session, right? This isn't something that staff has directed to closed session. So that's why I wanted to be prescriptive on it. We've also left it pretty vague what exactly staff should be bringing to closed session because of, I think, how broad the mayor's memo was. And that's why I was shaking my head no, was just, as it has happened often in closed session, when we start to broaden our conversations or questions, Nora stops us, refines us, and says that's actually an open session conversation. That's why I was shaking my head no, that we don't necessarily have carte blanche, right, to go off on whatever might interest us. And so I also wanted it to be very specific, that because that's just my interest until I think we get a lot more clarity on where it is that the mayor's actually intending on going. If his intent is exactly what he's written, well, then I think, my answer would be pretty easy today, would be just be no, right? And it would be something different to look at our current system and say, is there something actually broken? That's why I had asked for that, amendment, or at least clarification within the motion. It sounds like it was not accepted by the seconder. I'll just ask, correct, Councilmember Cohen?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess I'm happy again to sort of to vote no and just force the mayor to come back with something more clear. I would agree, though, with the commentary from my colleagues that we're going to be, we'd be back in the same boat we are today. At least in my mind, we would have a little more clarity. But I will swallow that pride, and I'll be the seconder for Councilmember Arenas' motion if Councilmember Cohen won't, with the specification that I asked for. So I'll be the seconder, and if a majority of the body would like to move it forward, then we can do so.
All right. If Councilmember Cohen is not going to accept the friendly amendment, Councilmember Arenas, do you want to move forward with Councilmember Prowls' friendly amendment, and you can second it?
Is that how that works? Yeah, if there's a motion on the floor, I don't think you can separate. That would be a substitute motion at that point, right?
Yes.
The motion on the floor is.
Thank you, Councilmember Cohen. I'll make you the honorary parliamentarian.
There is no motion on the floor at the moment if the maker of the motion and the seconder don't agree on the motion. So we don't have a motion in a second if our maker of a motion or seconder aren't in agreement at the moment.
I believe it's just that the amendment failed. The motion is still on the floor.
Yeah, the motion is on the floor. Just that
would be my understanding.
The amendment to the motion right now. Right? So anyway,
unless Councilmember Arenas would like to withdraw her friendly, because her friendly amendment was accepted.
The differences are minor that we're discussing right now. But go ahead.
My goodness, I'm thinking my motion has been cut up, chewed, and swallowed. I don't know how it looks like now. So listen, I think I've been very flexible in terms of what I'm adjusting. I don't know that we are saying two different things. I think that Councilmember Cohen, what you're looking for is the possibility to ask follow-up questions or to explore additional areas. And those areas that can be explored in closed session, as Nora said, have to do with, have to be of a legal tenure area, right? And so I think, and she talked about, we could talk about whether this applies to federated or not. So I think, and what I try to do is try to keep my suggestion as something really general so that we could ask some questions. What I did agree to is that, listen, let's answer some of the questions that are currently going to identify whether we can continue to ask or even continue to have these conversations. And that is, can we even legally move, if we will this impact our MOA from the Measure B? And so that is one of the areas of concern for me. I don't know that it makes sense to even ask other questions if the answer is no, right? So no, you have to wait until blah blah blah. I think it's 2025 is the date, if I remember correctly. So I think we're saying the same thing, Councilmember Cohen. I don't know that there's an area of concern that we couldn't discuss as long as it met the closed session criteria. Could you maybe expand on some of the areas that you would want to ask that you think that you heard maybe Norris not be open to?
No, I don't think there's anything that I'm saying that you're not saying. I think it's Councilmember Morales is trying to limit that discussion, and I'm trying to figure out what he's trying to limit it. I mean, I think there's potentially some areas that will be brought up about things on this memo that we might want to get some clarification on as to how we would proceed if there were recommendations to make some changes that Councilmember Morales seems to want us to not discuss, that he's, and I'm not sure how we would even limit that discussion, because it seems to me that once we're in closed session discussing this, we're free to ask questions anyway, as Vice Mayor Chen mentioned. So I guess I'm not even sure what Councilmember Morales is asking for here, but I think you and I are on the same page, Councilmember Reyes.
Okay, then we can move forward. It sounds like we might all be saying the same thing, but in a different way. So just slightly different. So anyway, so I'll keep my motion as is. I think we're all loosely on the same page. I think we're saying the same thing, maybe in different ways. And I think what we need to do is just have this conversation in closed session that has to do with these legal matters. And so that way council can figure out whether we can move forward with this or not. And then have all these answers that we're looking for from today. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you. I'm only slightly confused now, but I'm going to move forward. Councilmember Morales, do you want to further confuse me or take a vote?
I'm good, thank you.
All right, fantastic. All right, so we have a motion and a second. So Tony?
Arenas? Can you guys hear me? Okay, thank you. Cohen? Cohen?
Hi.
Davis?
Yes.
Peralez?
No.
Jones?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. On to the next topic. And that is the committee agendas and work plans, retroactive update to the January to June 2021 Community and Economic Development Committee work plan. And I'm going to go to the public first. And we have one speaker, Brian. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I hope you're doing well. And I hope the work team, the work plans really do get updated. What you're doing is really important. And those work plans are actually the backbone of the work the city does. I didn't really realize that when I first started becoming involved in these sessions, but I'm learning as I go along, as I'm sure everybody is. So I was just basically agreeing with what's going on. That last discussion also, thank you very much. I was really concerned when I read that too, and messing with people's pensions on their livelihoods, and I'm glad you're giving it a lot of thought. That really means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Paul?
Yes, thank you, Paul Soto. I'm a little bit confused about what the actual memo states in terms of the way that I'm reading it. It's saying that it's suspending the work, that it's just like dropping it, like these types of analysis are not going to be done. That's how I understand it to mean. So what I'm asking for is some clarification on that, if I'm reading that correctly. If I am, that concerns me, because we especially with the anti-displacement, it's almost like because of my attendance at these council meetings, I have literally over a few thousand hours in on these council meetings. I listen to everything, I take notes, and I have an excellent memory, so I keep track of like everything. And the thing that concerns me most is the 400,000 people that are planned to come here. Okay, and so for myself as a citizen, it feels like I'm standing watching a train head straight for a brick wall, and the train has no brakes, and it's just and it's gonna slam, and I'm standing there and I'm watching this go on, and I'm like compelling others around, hey, do you see this? And nobody's paying attention. And so as a citizen, that can be like really frustrating, and that's why I come here to compel the people that serve the people to start talking about these openly, because you're going to have to remove at least 200,000 people. Okay, and so I can't emphasize enough the work that is necessary with respect to the anti-displacement.
Thank you, Paul. Bringing it back to the committee.
Move approval.
All right, it's been moved, and can I get a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. Tony?
Arenas,
Yes.
Cohen,
Aye.
Davis,
Yes.
Peralez,
Yes.
Jones.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is the Transportation and Environment Committee Work Plan. And going to go to the public, and go ahead, Brian.
Thank you again. Really, sir, I hope when you look at the work plan, and I may not be exactly what you're talking about right now, but VTA is the people try and the tragedy that happened out there, right? But even before that and before the pandemic, VTA has always been considered a really strong source of the 2040 plan as far as moving people around. And as somebody who does move around and tries to use VTA and bikes and walking, VTA is the slowest. You know, I can take a bike, but the problem with taking a bike somewhere is that you risk your life, literally, you know, because it's just the way the streets are now. And that there's clear guidance from VTA, what exactly you're going to do. This tragedy that happened, and again, it's nothing to them. But in these work plans, like I said, this is the lifeblood, real clear what the city is going to do. And the city of San Jose carries a lot of sway over VTA. I think they're trying to go in the right direction, but this tragedy did show that there's choke points, if you will. It's a horrible way to find out. I hope people understand what I'm trying to say. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, bringing it back to the committee.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Tony?
Arenas,
Yes.
Cohen,
Aye.
Davis,
Yes.
Peralez,
Yes.
Jones.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, on to open forum. And Brian, go ahead.
All right, I hope I'm not dominating. I just don't get a chance to really. I very rarely am I quote unquote critical, and but trying to reach people, even before the pandemic was a problem. During the pandemic, making phone calls, writing emails about people want us involved. The 311 doesn't work. Trying to talk about potholes and stuff like that, it doesn't work. It's not that it's not work, it doesn't work. The contact in 311 does work sometimes if you have on the phone a lot of time, several hours at times. That's not an exaggeration. And calling council persons' offices. I was in one, and I'm not being this too, just because you guys are really busy, ladies and gentlemen, and now I'm in council 6. And I've called, once in a while I get a call back, people wouldn't follow through. Called about a sign that has a phone number on it that says, call if there's any concerns about the construction. And it's the same phone number that they just moved the sign around, and now they have new construction over at the Santana roadside. I made a mistake on my contract with my my deed, and it cost me a place to stay. And I'm not blaming anybody for it other than me. People with my type of visual issues mix things up. And it was just an and or an or. People in lobbyists and stuff can pick up the phone and talk to people 500 times or more if the San Jose spotlight story is correct. And we can't. And it's really frustrating. It really, really, really is. It's very frustrating. And it's like we're not feeling like we're being heard. And I just want to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Paul?
Yeah, Paul Soto. There are some serious issues, legal, both legal, moral, and ethical, with respect to that panel that convened in order to install Chris Burton. Okay, you have Gary Dillabo on that committee. You have Pierluigi. You have Eric Schoenhauer that was conveniently left out. And then they found out about that and then installed him. That's what good democracy does. The press informs the people so that the people have the power. We have the power, not you. And you are exercising powers that are not, that do not belong to you in order to serve the needs of these billionaires that are coming to this city. Don't you see what's going on around you? Don't you see the poverty that's being created? Don't you see the oppression that's going to only increase? Within the next 5 years, you're going to hear a weeping and a crying in this city that is going to be unprecedented in its history since 1846, July 14th, because it's going to be on par with that. What we have today is manifest destiny with manners. That's all it is. It's manifest destiny with manners. We want the Mexicans, because this was an agricultural society. So right now, the grandkids of the farm workers are living here. This is not an agrarian economy anymore. So these people are basically superfluous. Get the offspring of the Mexicans out of here. And they're going to do it economically. They're going to squeeze the human beings. They're going to squeeze the Mexicans to where they're so impoverished, so emasculated, so humiliated and degraded. And all the decisions to do that and accomplish that are coming right out of that committee, because they're installing a person that is an expert at euthentics. Euthentics is a precursor to eugenics, meaning you're going to get all these people out of here.
Thank you, Paul. That's the last public speaker, so this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.